of meeting number 106 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. From our agenda, we dealt with the mandatory Provident Fund and delays for the Hong Kongers last week. So the next point to discuss is the draft letter regarding the government's response to the final report of the Special Committee on Afghanistan. At the end of the meeting, as I said earlier, there will be a Punjabi food today, and all the staff, support staff, and honourable members are welcome to join us. And to avoid the audio feedback, before we begin, I would like to ask all members and others in-person participants to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Please take note of the following preventive measures in place to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. Only use a black approved earpiece. Keep your earpiece away from all microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the sticker placed on the table for this purpose. And thank you for your cooperation. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. I would like to make few comments for the benefit of the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For members in the Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. In members in the room here in personally present, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your understanding in this regard. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Back to the Afghanistan letter and press release. The discussion regarding the draft letter was previously done in camera. I ask all members to be careful about disclosing information that we have decided or discussed in camera. We need to confirm all paragraphs of the letter before we can look at the press release. Last week, we suspended the meeting and we had a list of speakers. Before I give that list of speakers, I like to welcome Madam Bria and Madam Tillon to the committee, and the following members were on the list. So we have Mr. McLean, he had the floor, then Mr. Chang, Mr. Radikov, Mr. Ali, Madam Kwan, Madam Kaibaga, and Mr. Al-Khoury. Mr. McLean, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't see Madam Dillon on the screen. Is she on the screen?
She will be in soon. That's fine. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I will. Thank you. Anytime. Okay, Mr. McLean, floor is with you.
Thank you again for the floor today. The purpose of the meeting today, of course, is to look at the letter on Afghanistan that this committee has had before for quite some time. And it's my pleasure to introduce this motion at this House today. I'll read it out loud, Mr. Chair. That regarding the draft letter concerning the government's response to the final report of the Special Committee on Afghanistan as sent to committee members on May 21st, 2024, paragraphs numbered 19, 20, and 23 be deemed adopted without amendment, that the letter and news release be then deemed adopted, that the chair be then instructed to transmit the letter to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship on the second business day following the adoption of this motion, that the chair then issue the news release on behalf of the committee immediately upon transmitting the letter to the Minister, that the letter and the news release be then posted to the committee's website, and that the study be then deemed concluded. That's the motion, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and I'll go into it here about why this is very important. and why we need to get this moving as quickly as possible. Mr. Chair, I've been on this committee since September, and we've been looking at this. I actually looked at how many meetings we've dedicated to this letter on Afghanistan, which has been shortened to a small letter only, and we've had 18 meetings, and that's being conservative as far as the amount of time we've devoted to it. It is a short letter, but let me read to you very quickly what...
Is it possible for our colleague for the motion to be...
On a point of order, Mr. Al-Khoury.
Is it possible our colleague to for the motion to be read in French also, please?
Absolutely. Although I didn't think that was necessary, but I'm happy to do it if you'd like, Mr.
Whatever, Mr.
Chair.
McLean, it's your call.
I think that there's enough that I have to talk about here that maybe it'd be repetitive. If Mr. Al-Khoury didn't understand it through translation, is that the issue, Mr. Al-Khoury?
We have a member also, he speaks French and his English is not as well as the French, who is Alexis Brunel-Duceppe. I don't know if Alexis would like the motion to be read in French or not. I leave it up to him.
Si je peux me permettre.
If, Chair, I could interject, we received the motion in the 2 official languages, so everything's fine for me. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Mr. McLean, floor is with you.
Juste pour l'instant,
But I will read it out in French as well at the insistence of my colleague.
Members, I said earlier, and we had a meeting of the liaison committee last week, it is very important that only one person should speak, because taking into consideration the health of our interpreters and other people that are participating here. So please raise your hand and I will acknowledge you, if you wish to speak. So Mr. McLean, floor is with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start again so there's no confusion. Que, en ce qui concerne les
that regarding the draft letter concerning the government's response to the final report of the Special Committee on Afghanistan as sent to committee members on May 21st, 2024, the paragraphs numbered 19, 20 and 23 be deemed adopted without amendment, that the letter and news release be then deemed adopted, that the Chair be then instructed to transmit the letter to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship on the second business day following the adoption of this motion, that the Chair then issue the news release on behalf of the committee immediately upon transmitting the letter to the Minister, that the letter and the news release be then posted to the committee's website, and that the study be then deemed concluded.
I hope that's well understood, and I want to proceed now with the rationale behind it, Mr. Chair. And we've spoken about the number of meetings we've had on this, the amount of time this committee has spent on this simple letter the whole time I've been on this committee, since the month of September 2023. And
Mr. McLean, anything that we talked in camera cannot be talked in public. I just want to remind all members, and please
I agree.
Make sure. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you very much. And I'll be very careful about what was said in camera, because I recognize the rules in Parliament don't allow me to state in public what was stated in camera in the 18 meetings we had on this, where there seems to be a filibuster on getting this letter actually approved and put in front of the Canadian public. So I will be very careful. And if you find me where I'm drifting into areas where I may be offside, Mr. Chair, I'd be appreciated if you correct me rather than have me go to jail or any other offense that may incur. So I'm on side here with my colleagues in particular, because it is important we do the work at Parliament very effectively and by the rules. But I do want this report to get out. I didn't start with this report. I mean, this report started before I was on this committee. I need people to understand that this is a long time overdue. But getting familiar with this is the role of parliamentarians, and I have gotten very familiar with this report and what we need to do. But the offending The paragraph that seems to offend is paragraph 22, and paragraph 23. Paragraph 23 reads, the committee also recommends that the government request the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to investigate if charges should be laid against George Young, the Chief of Staff to then Defence Minister Harjit S. Sajjan, for his role in providing a blank template of a Government of Canada document to circumvent established protocols to ensure the safety and security of personnel and process, and for his role in the facilitation of the production and fraudulent Government of Canada documents. This abusive process could have led to the deaths of Canadian Armed Forces personnel or the ability for non-state actors to profit from a behind-the-scenes two-stream process for accessing Canadian travel documents. This is the offending paragraph that people don't want as part of this report, and I fail to see why, because we talk about transparency of government, we talk about many things in this committee. This government says many things that it doesn't seem to want to deliver upon. But let's go back about the history of what's happened here. There was a federal election in 2021, a federal election that was chosen by the Prime Minister to call during a very precarious time in international affairs in the world, and a country that we had supported in the rebuilding processes, we'd supported in the liberation process, and we had committed, as we say, blood and silver to making sure that there was a democracy that was trying to emerge in Afghanistan. All that fell apart in the summer of 2021, and many other things were going on in the summer of 2021 as well. The Prime Minister at that point in time decided that it was time to call an election, an unnecessary, very expensive election in Canada that led to many consequences across this country. But the main consequences were our inability to respond to the international crisis that was happening in Afghanistan. And I recall, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure many of my colleagues around the table recall, the times we spent going door to door and actually getting those people that had relatives in Afghanistan that had helped Canadian forces in Afghanistan.
Thank you. It was just brought to my attention that I believe this meeting is in public, correct?
That's correct.
I believe what's being broadcast at the moment says in camera, and I'm just wondering if we could just quickly check that and see if...
No, it's public. I said earlier in the beginning,
Yeah.
I said we are meeting in
We were
public.
looking at the video feed coming from here.
Should be in public as far as the clerk tells me. So you want to suspend for a few minutes to make sure that everything is correct? Okay, I'm going to suspend for a few minutes to make sure that everything is in order. meeting is back to order. Mr. McLean has the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I continue, Mr. Chair, and I don't want to start over all again, and so can I confirm that my remarks as far as introducing the motion are public and publicly available?
Yes.
Thank you.
That is my understanding, and
Okay.
I have checked with the technical staff, and that is exactly what they have told me.
Thank you. Okay. I'll go back to where I was as far as the election, the unnecessary and expensive election from 2020-21 that interrupted our role in serving the people of Afghanistan, in particular the people trying to get to Canada from Afghanistan that had been allies of Canada in the process of attempting to bring more democracy and a functional government to Afghanistan that failed in the summer of 2021 and our inability to respond. The issue with that is that, you know, Canada is a viable, supposedly, political entity, respected less and less around the world. So our democracy, as seen as a rules-based order, is falling apart. And this motion addresses that as far as holding people accountable for what was an effort to circumvent the rule of law and actually having some people have access to documents that allowed the immigration of certain people from Afghanistan that weren't authorized by the government and weren't permitted, but had a behind-the-scenes access to documents that allowed them to come into Canada. And that was facilitated through the Minister of Defence's office. And the Minister of Defense has disavowed any association with the individual that proved to be responsible for that, but that was his chief of staff. And I'm happy to have the support of the other opposition parties in this motion, particularly, you know, Mr. Alexis Brunel Duceppe, who's very concerned as we are about the effects this has on international accountability around the world, but Ms. Jenny Kwan from the NDP as well. And I will quote her support and her concerns about this from a previous meeting where she says, "I don't believe that chiefs of staff act on their own without the authorization of their political masters."
Mr.
McLean.
Is the everything that we are talking about is that we cannot quote the stuff from the meeting that was held in camera. So please continue, just to make sure.
I believe
because I don't want to get
this
you
was a
into
public
trouble.
meeting, so it's meeting, I'm quoting from meeting number 59 of this committee. So I'll double check, let's have somebody double check if that was a public meeting.
Because the public meeting is okay, that's fine, as long as you're
So-
fine.
Well, no, I don't want to be
just
outside
want to
here.
protect you.
Can you check, can the clerk check with whether meeting 59 was a public meeting or if I'm quoting something that
Okay,
shouldn't be quoted?
just 1 second. Public?
Public?
It is
Okay.
public. Thank you.
So let me reiterate the support of my colleague from the NDP here. I don't believe that chiefs of staff act on their own without the authorization of their political masters. If you have correspondence to indicate that ministers were aware and knew this was all going on at the same time, that would be a pertinent piece of documentation we need to have. That's, and I appreciate the support of my NDP colleague in this motion as well. It is well noted. And moving this forward, we have to make sure that we hold this government accountable, and that's the role of all opposition parties, is to make sure that all of this nonsense that goes on with this government is actually, you know, very, very much held to account. That is our role. You know, people talk about Her Majesty's, pardon me, I do that often, His Majesty's loyal opposition. This is what we do. We hold the government to account. And those government include, those people holding the government to account include the backbenchers of every party, not just the Conservative Party of Canada, but also the New Democratic Party, the Bloc Québécois, and even, if you will, and I'm looking across the table here, the backbenchers in the Liberal Party of Canada. Because malfeasance at the government level, that's government and council, should be held to account in Parliament by all members of Parliament. So I'm happy we're moving forward with this today, Mr. Chair, but I do want to talk about responsible government and what this means, because there is, in the end, in responsible government, ministerial accountability on the table here. And that ministerial accountability can't just rest with the Chief of Staff. And I appreciate the Chief of Staff is the one that will have to be investigated by the RCMP if the RCMP determines that that person, Mr. George Young, the Chief of Staff to then Defence Minister Harjit S. Sajjan, was breaking the law in providing template documents for people to enter Canada from Afghanistan. That is something that we don't do in this committee. Our job here is to refer that to the people that will determine if charges should be laid. And those people, of course, are the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So I don't understand why this has been filibustered this long when it's something that should proceed, you know, as a function of normalcy in a democracy governed by the rule of law with an arm's length police body. This is something we need to refer to them, and I'm pushing on how we can do that. And I would ask this question to my colleagues on the other side of the table. If not this accountability, then what? Because this is clearly an infringement of the law. I'm not going to say whether this person is guilty or not. I am going to say something outside the process, the viable process that should have happened in a Canadian system of laws was moved around here. Somebody worked around the system and provided some template documents so that some people were in line ahead of other people to get from a troubled zone in the world, a very troubled zone in the world, into Canada. And that's not the way this country operates. We're a country with the rule of law. But the trouble I have with this, Mr. Chair, is that 18 meetings, a basic filibuster on getting a letter out, 18 meetings. So it's that whole concept of where there's smoke, there's fire. Is there a reason why my colleagues on the Liberal side of the table are moving heaven and earth not to have this paragraph in this letter to refer this to the RCMP to determine if charges should be laid against Mr. George Young, Chief of Staff to the Honourable Harjit S. Sajjan, then Minister of Defence? It is something that perplexes all of us because it doesn't seem like, if I can say this, a hill to die on, Mr. Chair. We need to move forward with this. But again, accountability. And I'll reference this whole accountability framework because this government has come into power with the concept of accountability and transparency at the forefront. But like many things I've seen with this government, I know I've only been here since 2019, my colleagues will recall, but the Prime Minister came in 2015, and he was talking about raise the bar on openness and transparency in government. And I suggest that exactly the opposite has happened, that this government is no longer transparent, it is opaque, it does not want to take accountability for any of its actions, it continues to put words on the table that it does not fulfill, and we have to move past this and actually get back to a plan where we have a government that functions the way it talks. Words on paper are one thing, but actually delivering against those words on paper is the role of the executive part of government. And that is not being done right now. But the Transparency Act was introduced by the Prime Minister. And that Transparency Act had the objectives to achieve ending the secret nature of the House of Commons Board of Internal Economy and entrenching a law that all government information must be made both open by default and available in formats that are relevant and functional. We want a government that is more open after a thorough review and modernization of the entire access to information system, the elimination of all fees beyond the $5 access to information request fee, which should be refunded in the event of delay, and for the Information Commissioner's mandate to be strengthened by giving her the power to enforce informational laws. That was the intent of the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, when he came into power in 2015. And may I suggest that 9 years later, that intent is a joke, that has not been fulfilled at all. So words on paper again, that this government is not abiding. In finance, we used to say that you're not eating your own cooking. So get back here and actually put these words down on paper and recognize what they mean, even when it means asking the RCMP to investigate a chief of staff, the #1 confidant of a minister in the government. And that is incredibly important here in this. Well, one of the things that we're worried about here, and one of the reasons we think it may have been filibustered as hard as it has been here, Mr. Chair, is because of the rush for people to get out of Afghanistan. People were in absolute misery. Their lives were on the line. This is something that you will do whatever you have to do at that point in time to get yourself and your family safe. And sometimes in those horrible situations, there are people in the mix that profit from the misery of other people. And if somebody in this government has helped some third party profit from the misery that was being visited upon Afghanis at that point in time, that's something the RCMP need to root out and make sure that this pay-to-play that seems to happen so often with this government didn't get manifested in the evacuation of Afghani nationals that have helped Canadians when we were over there trying to instill a new form of government, a democracy for all Afghanis. Canada is not a banana republic. We need a rule of law. We've had a rule of law, and it is drifting down in the world at this point in time. Nobody sees the rule of law in Canada being enforced anymore. This is one small example. Get this person examined by the appropriate authorities for doing something that he should never have done. Breaking the law does not go with impunity just because you're connected to the governing Liberal Party of Canada. You've got to ensure that everybody has the same accountability at the end of the day, not just people that aren't your friends. Your friends have to meet the same bar of accountability here going forward. And I can reference all kinds of instances, Mr. Chair, the SNC-Lavalin affair, of course, being the most pronounced, where rules were broken. Cabinet ministers were effectively dismissed, although it happened over a series of incidents. But Jody Wilson-Raybould is no longer a cabinet minister with this government for a reason, because she actually tried to speak truth to power and make sure there was some accountability for a mercantilist prime minister who was trying to make sure that a company where he had some connections didn't face the full consequences of the rule of law. And this is, again, part of what we're trying to enforce here is the rule of law applying to everybody and every entity. And that's not happening at all with this government. Mr. George Young has to be held accountable for his actions here. And I'm remiss in not making sure that we talk about it. It's who you know in this government that gets you paid. I can tell you how many studies, and I was looking at another one last week, where one of the government's friends is writing a report that is a nonsense report. But millions of dollars are being spent putting words on paper. The Auditor General herself brought forth the issues around the number of contracts of hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to McKinsey without any accountability for what's happening with those reports at the end of the day. Money is flowing off the table. The government's friends are getting rich in the process, and Canadians are being ill-served. Canadians are being taxed more in so many ways. And the most egregious example, of course, is the raising the tax that was introduced last week by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Our Canada's, because even in the Conservative side of this House, and I'm certain the New Democratic Party and the Bloc Québécois as well, are dismayed at how our international reputation is in tatters because of the way the world views this mercantilist government. This is no way to run a country. And we need to move past it and make sure we start governing effectively. McKinsey is one example. We have other examples. These are a lot of rich people getting richer with this government's actions. We govern for the people of Canada, and we need to know that. The broad aspects of people of Canada elect us to come here and make sure government is held to account, that this money doesn't slip off the table the way we've seen it happen here. And I will talk about the greenwashing, of course. We can go through all kinds of that, but there are all kinds of people around the world that are benefiting from this government's actions, actions that are unaccountable and leading us nowhere. But I'll go into the other two offending or apparently offending parts of this committee report that don't seem to be seeing the light of day just yet, and I'm hoping that we get some consensus around the table that these are all applicable paragraphs. Number 19 says, during its study, the committee was informed that IRCC, GAC, which is Global Affairs Canada, and DND had each conducted internal investigations and reviews regarding the issuance of inauthentic facilitation letters to third parties. In October 2022, IRCC concluded that the letters it issued did not come officially from the Government of Canada. The department was unable to determine the exact number of inauthentic letters that were circulated and referred the matter to law enforcement in February 2023. Former IRCC Deputy Minister Christiane Fox denied having found any evidence that Senator McFedrin had sent any documentation to IRCC staff regarding her actions. In March 2023, GAC conducted an internal investigation on the matter. In November 2023, DND informed the committee that, through its own internal review, the department had concluded that none of its officials or those of the CAF, Canadian Armed Forces, were involved in the production or transmission of facilitation letters and that no staff were aware of third-party distribution. There's nothing wrong with that paragraph, and yet it has not passed this committee yet. Number 20, paragraph 20. The committee remains unclear as to how relevant officials and ministers were not made aware of Senator Mary Lou McFedrin's actions during the evacuation and did not respond to them, especially since she was in direct contact with the DND Chief of Staff at the time. Chief of Staff in question, Mr. George Young. As such, the committee recommends that all notes, records, and reports from the investigation into fake facilitation letters be provided to the committee upon conclusion of these investigations. The committee hopes that such disclosure will shed light on any integrity issues within government evacuation processes and that any issues identified will be resolved in the event of future humanitarian crises. Nothing wrong with that paragraph, again, Mr. Chair. So I've read out the parts there, but I do want to get the timeline here so people are aware of what we're talking about. The Special Committee on Afghanistan started its report shortly after the disaster that happened with this country and the people that were our friends in Afghanistan and not being able to make sure they evacuated in an orderly fashion from Afghanistan. That committee started hearing in December 13, 2021. The new government came in October of 2021. That committee reported on Wednesday, June 8, 2022, and the response from the government was on October 6th, 2022. These are normal lines of the way committees respond and report. And then IRCC committee, this committee, started looking at this in February of 2023. Here we are over a year later. And as I said, 18 meetings of filibustering on what should be a pretty routine, transparent process of moving this along. We've seen 26 witnesses. We need to make sure that we continue to get this letter in front of the appropriate authorities so that people are held to account. It's about accountability. It's about transparency. And I've said a lot here today, Mr. Chair, and I hope that my colleagues around the table will support this motion and get this letter completed today and move it towards action items that will hold somebody to account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Mr. Chang and then Mr. McGuire. Mr. Chang, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone here in the room this morning, and I hope you all had a good weekend. And I want to thank Mr. McLean for his words on this, on his motion. I too have been here since September, like yourself. And in regards to the 2021 election, I think it was a good thing, personally, because I got elected in 2021. It gives me the opportunity to be here, to sit across from all of you, to be your colleague, and to be able to do the work of the government. It's also a good year for me is because that's the year that I retired from the police department. The important word is retired. I was never kicked out. I never quit. I went through everything, and I retired after serving for 28 years. Meritorious service for 28 years. You know, and I learned a lot in the 28 years I was there. And one of the things that I learned is police is an independent agency. They function on their own. They're accountable to themselves, and they're accountable to the Police Services Board, which governs them. And they're not accountable to the government of the day, to the mayor. In the U.S., I mean the United States of America, the system is different. The mayor of the city dictates what the police service does. Right? But in Canada, especially in Ontario, I cannot speak for other provinces in Canada because policing is a provincial matter. And of course, the Attorney General is the person in the province that's in charge of the police department, but each police service has a police services board that is made up of civilian, provincial, and city appointed personnel that governs what the police services does. Not the mayor, not the councillor in the city. It's the Police Services Board, and it is important for us to know that fact, because the reason it's so important is, as a government, we cannot tell the RCMP what to do. As a government, we cannot tell the OPP what to do. You know, as a government, we cannot tell York Regional Police or Toronto Police what to do, because it is something that they're independent. And the reason I'm bringing that up, and it's so important so that members across from me knows this, because of those rules, we are not a banana republic country, because we have independence, and because of that, we are not banana republic. Our head of state cannot dictate to the police service what to do and how to do it and how to investigate and who to investigate. So it is crucial that we understand those things. I'm not sure the honorable members across what background or what profession you are from. I mean, if you're from the legal profession or some other profession that may not have had any dealings with the police department and may not have been, hopefully none of you have been arrested before or had any dealings with the police service. You know, and I had the misfortune last night. Of having an accident while driving to Ottawa. And, you know, the misfortune for me, but was minor misfortune, but I hit a deer on Highway 7 last night, and unfortunate for the deer did not survive, but I was fortunate to just some aches and pains, but I'm here because the reason I'm here, it's the important work that we are doing here, the important work, and that's why I want to be here to serve alongside with you all, right? And the challenge for me last night was I cannot tell the police what to do. They still have to do their job, and they came, they investigated, they gave me a police report, and I'm here. I'm lucky to be alive, but this is not my being 64 years old and driving for the last 46 years of my life in Canada, it's not my first accident, and hopefully it's my last accident. I don't want to have an accident. And it's the first time hitting a deer in my life. And I never hit anything else except for a car, and thank God for that. And I'm fortunate because my staff wanted me to bring something to Ottawa for this last week of Parliament, and they wanted me to bring something which was important for them. And because I could not carry it on my motorcycle, because usually I come to Ottawa on a motorcycle. If I was on a motorcycle last night, I may not have been here with you this morning. So I'm so grateful that I'm here with you this morning, because I was driving an SUV, and the SUV sustained quite a lot of damage. And but I'm here, and I haven't told my wife yet. You guys are the first one to know what happened last night, because if I tell my wife, she's going to be upset at me because I was driving her car. So that's the challenge for me, and but I will tell her in my own ways. Transparency is very important, yes.
One person at a time, please. Again, thank you.
I just want to go back to the part where we are not a banana republic. I just want to make sure that the people out there understands that we are not a banana republic, and we will not go into that banana republic label, because we are a country with the rule of law. We are a country that respects the law. We are the country that understands what law is all about. People come to Canada from all across the globe because why? They want to come to Canada because we are a democracy, we follow the law, and we respect each other's freedom, we respect each other's rights, religion, sexual orientation, and we respect what food you eat, where you live, who you hang out with. You know, I chose to hang out with my colleagues across the aisle here. You know, I'm so happy to be able to hang out with all of you because I chose this. Nobody made me do this. I worked hard to be here, and I'm so happy that I'm able to see all of you here today. You know, because if it wasn't for my quick thinking and little police motor vehicle maneuver, I may not have been here with you this morning because of the accident I had last night. And if you want proof, I do have a police report for that to show that I was in an accident and the car is damaged quite extensively. But anyways, going back to democracy, it is, we are living in a democracy, and I believe, and I firmly believe, that we should leave the police to do the job that they are paid to do, or they are entrusted to do, or they're sworn to do. They're sworn to secrecy. They're sworn to confidentiality. They're sworn to fulfilling their duties as a police officer. And it's the highest honor. Like being a member of Parliament is such an honor for me to be here. And, you know, it's an honor for me to be here because, you know, I get to be in a place where only 338 members gets elected to be here. It's an honor for me because 128,000 residents in my riding of Markham Unionville lives there. And it was good enough for them to think that I deserve to be here, or I should be here because I represent them. And the reason, one of the reasons that I would be representing them here is because out of the 128,000 people that live in my riding, 66% of the residents are of Chinese descent, which is the largest Chinese population in any riding right across Canada. So for me, it's important to reflect the community that I live in, to reflect the community that I represent. Apart from speaking 4 dialects in Chinese, which is Mandarin, Cantonese, Hubei, and Hakka. I also speak Urdu. I also speak Punjabi. I also speak Hindi. and I speak a little bit of English. So it helps me to communicate and meet with my resident and to help them in the best way that I can possibly help them in advocating on their behalf, and making sure that they understand that I will take their voice to Ottawa. Because for me,
Point of order.
together we achieve.
Mr. Chair, just on the issue of the debates are supposed to be germane to discussion. While I appreciate and I'm very happy to see my friend is here from Toronto, all safe in one piece, minus his wife's SUV, and I'm sure she will pay him back for doing that. Maybe she'll take his motorcycle out, but I don't believe this debate is germane to the Afghanistan letter we're trying to complete in the 3 paragraphs that my colleague read in. I also suggest that at the next meeting of this committee, we have deer stew.
Thank you. Mr. Chang, floor is with you. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Comich, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the thing. I am coming to my discussion on the motion that Mr. McLean has brought up. And the reason I wanted to speak about the Banana Republic and I wanted to speak about being here in Parliament is to bring about honoring Canada's legacy in Afghanistan. We responded as a government to the humanitarian crisis, and we helped people reach safety. I was fortunate to be able to be at Pearson International Airport to welcome the last flight that came in from Afghanistan. To see the faces of people, family members that were on the ground waiting. I met with many of them. I spoke to many of them. There were families there that had waited 7 years to reunite with their brother, to reunite with their mother, and the extended family that they had brought along with them. To see the relief, to see the happiness in the face, it is priceless. Just like the MasterCard slogan, it's priceless. On August 15th, 2021, the government and security forces of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan collapsed, and panic took hold in the streets of the last territory that had been under its control. The panic was so extensive, the capital, the Kabul, was under siege at that time. Returning to power via military force was the Taliban, a group whose repressive rule had horrified the world in the late 90s and who had harbored the Al-Qaeda terrorists that carried out the attacks of September 11th in 2001. I remember that day very well. September 11, 2001, I distinctly remember. I was standing in the corner of Trench Street and Major Mackenzie Drive in the city of Richmond Hill, directing traffic right outside of Mackenzie Health Science Center, the hospital there. Myself and a colleague, Daryl Rice, we were standing there directing traffic that day. And when the plane hit and the news and people that were driving by and asking us if we heard about it, and we were flabbergasted at such a horrible, horrible turn of events happening in New York City. So speaking about the Al-Qaeda in September 11, the Republic's collapse unleashed shockwaves within Afghanistan and around the world. It signified the abrupt end of a nearly 20-year effort which had seen hundreds of thousands of international coalition troops serve, with thousands fallen or wounded, as well as billions of dollars spent on security force training, reconstruction, and development. As the situation on the ground unraveled, a multinational air bridge was formed. Many were rescued amid volatile and dangerous conditions. However, when the final evacuation flight departed Kabul at the end of August 2021...
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Point d'ordre.
Point of order, Chair.
Mr. Brunel Desailly.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est pas parce que on parle.
Thank you, Chair. It's not because we're talking about Afghanistan that we're actually germane to the motion, because the motion refers to a specific letter. Sorry, I am actually speaking. I haven't finished my point of order. So we're in a public and there's filibustering on something. Everyone knows how we're going to vote. So I would... Please, I am speaking. Well, I'm calling for a point of order, says Ms. Baga.
Person at a time. If there's another point of order, I will entertain that, but the floor is...
I'm calling
Mr.
a point of order on what Mr. Brunel Duceppe is commenting on.
Sure. Let Mr. Brunel Duceppe finish, and then I'll acknowledge you on a point of order.
Donc,
Mr.
merci.
Brunel Duceppe, go ahead, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'd like to say is that we're outside of the subject. It's not because we're talking about the situation that happened in Afghanistan that it's actually relevant to the subject today, namely the letter on Afghanistan. There's people listening to us, watching us. I'm convinced that they don't agree with how taxpayers' money is being spent as we speak. Everyone knows already how we're going to vote. So I suggest that we need to be serious, colleagues, and vote.
Thank you. Madam Kaibaga on point of order.
I'm calling a point of order on what my colleague Brunel Duceppe is commenting on, as well as what was said earlier. I think my colleague Chang has the floor right now. He's making comments. He's allowed to expand his comments to reach the point that he's trying to make. We've never stopped any of our colleagues from making comments. So, Mr. Chair, I think...
Point of order, it was in camera. It was in camera, and Ms. Kaibaga said something that happened in camera, and she has no right to do that.
Mr.
Our colleagues have the right
Madam
to
Kaibaga,
expand.
hold on just 1 second. To all honorable members, if you can raise your hand, I will acknowledge you. And Madam Kaibaga, I think we are getting into debate, so I'm going to move on. Madam
I just want to finish my point, Mr. Chair. I called the point of order to say that our colleagues have the right to expand and make comments on the point that they're trying to make. This is a very serious motion that's here before us today, and our colleague, Mr. Chang, has the right to make comments, and I have all the time to listen to what he has to say.
Thank you. Madam Kwan, are you on point of order as well?
Yes, I'm on
Thank you, Madam Kwan. On point of order.
Mr. Chair. Do I have the floor now?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. I'm afraid that the last comment that Ms. Karabaga made what is in violation of confidential information at an in-camera meeting. As such, I would seek your advice on what is the process to follow based on that.
Thank you. I'm going to suspend the meeting to talk to the clerk for a few seconds here. want to say something before I say something?
Oui, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Chair. Something has just happened that's unfortunate, but at the same time, I don't think that my colleague Ariel was acting in bad faith. Perhaps she committed an error, but it is a breach of privilege. I could put forward a motion and send that to the House, but I don't want us to finish our session, nor do I want to put my colleague in a troublesome situation. But unfortunately, as something has been said that should have remained confidential, I would ask unanimously that the committee would allow it to be withdrawn from the Blues and that the video could be changed. This part where we had this information that should have been kept confidential. And obviously, I would like to receive apologies from my colleague. And then we could wipe out this incident on the basis of those three conditions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Duceppe. As always, I appreciate what you are doing. As a chair, my job is to make sure that everything is done according to the rules. So, Madam Kaibaga, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I want to apologize. I did not mean to say anything that is out of bounds. My intention was really just to allow my colleague to make the comments that he was making. So I do want to take that back. I believe that we've given a wide latitude of topics of debate.
Please, Madam Kaibaga,
yes.
Only please keep concise, because I don't want
I'm trying to be
you.
really concise, but I want my colleague to understand that I was not trying to go out of bounds. Sometimes we forget the meetings that we have in camera and the ones that we don't have in camera. So my intention was not to go out of bounds and to offend my colleague. And I do apologize for that. I just want to make sure that we can continue to give the same wide of latitude that we're giving to others to make comments and not to interrupt our colleagues as they're making comments.
Thank you. So is there Mr. Bruno Duceppe?
Je pouvais pas être plus gentil que ça.
Well, I really have been excessively kind. I couldn't have gone any further. And yet, I wasn't asking for an explanation. What happened was that confidential information has been revealed in public. That's a breach of privilege. I could take it to the House and there could be consequences. I'm just asking for apologies, not explanations about the context. I want apologies about the fact that there has been a breach of my parliamentary privilege, and I want unanimity from the committee. I'm asking the committee to give me their unanimous consent to withdraw what has been said from the Blues and also to withdraw what was said from the committee video. And I'm giving Ms. Kaibaga a last chance to give a formal apology without any explanation of the context. And if I don't have a correct apology from her, then, unfortunately, I will have to push this further. I want to have an apology about what has been happening. I don't want to have any context or explanation. That is my request, Mr. Chair, and I think I'm a very fair player.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno Duceppe. You are very fair. In fact, you are a gentleman, and I do commend that. And Madam Kaibaga, would you please respond? If you apologize and take the comment back, then I'll go to the unanimous consent from the committee.
Yes, Mr. Chair. As I said earlier, I do apologize to my colleague as his privilege was breached, and I do take it back. I think I'll leave the rest of the actions to the rest of the committee, as I cannot make that decision on behalf of the committee.
Thank you kindly, and appreciate that. Is there a unanimous consent committee to do that? Take the comment back. Mr. Comich?
Je veux dire mes commentaires en français, Monsieur le Président.
I will express myself in French. I'd like to understand the precedent. Has the committee already decided in the past by unanimous consent to actually change the public debate that's taken place here and that appears in the Hansard and change the video? I'd like to understand the repercussions of the request from Mr. Bruno Duceppe for the official record of this public meeting. Has this happened in other committees or not?
I cannot say that, but I certainly would love to see, because the way he has acted, and we all know that he has shown the highest standards, someone can show towards their colleagues, and so did Madam Kaibaga has accepted, has apologized and accepted to take out of the blues on the committee, and it's up to the members. So now, if you can give a unanimous consent, I will make sure that clerk does the necessary work that has to be done.
Monsieur le Président, je vois que le greffier tape.
Mr. Chair, I see that the clerk is quickly typing in his computer to find examples in the past to see if this procedure has applied in other committees. I, of course, am going to give my consent to this because it's been a breach of Mr. Ducep's privilege by revealing what was said in camera, so I agree.
Is there a unanimous consent in the committee if there's Madam Kwan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Right off the top, when I noted that there was, when I raised a point of order, I noted that there's been a violation. I texted Mr. Bruno Ducept and inquired about his point of view and indicated that I would defer to him on how he wishes to proceed, seeing as that it is his privilege that has been violated. And so from that perspective, I will support what Mr. Bruno Ducept wishes.
Thank you, Madam Kwan. So I see there is a unanimous consent to go with Mr. Bruno Ducept's suggestion? Yes, carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Ducept. I do appreciate and thank you, Madam Kaibaga, for being a professional member of the committee, doing what we need to do to calm down things and carry on with the agenda. So, Mr. Chang, floor is with you. And just before Mr. Chang, you start speaking, again, I beg you, members, I request you that anything that we talked about in camera, please try to be careful not to do this, because otherwise it will put us into a very, very difficult situation. And I don't see that any one of us want to see one of our colleagues to get into this situation. So with that, I want to thank all the committee members for their unanimous consent as well on this issue. Appreciate that. So with that, it makes my life as a chair much easier as well. And I do enjoy, in fact, working with both sides on the aisle here. So, Ms. Chang, please go ahead. The floor is with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our members for correcting what happened earlier. So left behind were people who had tried, with the coalition's encouragement, to advance the security, freedom, opportunities, and dignities in their country. Within Afghanistan, there is now a tableau of vulnerabilities, millions of people trying to avoid hunger, destitute, or retaliation. Afghanistan is not only one of the many crises in distant parts of the world. Canada has a legacy there. Consequently, the Taliban's takeover has been emotionally significant for Canadians, as well as implication for Canadians' public policy. At the peak of Canada's mission in Afghanistan, approximately 2,950 Canadian soldiers and over 120 civilian personnel were deployed to Afghanistan. Cumulatively, more than 40,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces served in Afghanistan between December 2001 and March 2014. As part of the operations, at different times with different mandates in Kabul and Kandahar, taken together, the counterterrorism, stabilization, combat, support, and training missions undertaken by Canada were its largest military deployment since the Second World War. with 158 members of the Canadian Armed Forces and one Canadian diplomat losing their lives in service to Canada. Furthermore, Canada has provided $3.8 billion in international assistance to Afghanistan since 2001. Over almost 20 years of international partnership with Afghanistan, many Afghans experience improved access to health care and education. They were also able to participate in efforts, however flawed and incomplete, to build a democracy that was connected to the world. It is these gains that are now at risk. To learn lessons from what transpired and to determine how Canada can help Afghan people who worked alongside the thousands of Canadian Armed Forces, diplomats, and development personnel who served in the country, the House of Commons created a special committee on Afghanistan. It was mandated, this special committee was mandated to conduct hearings, to examine and review the events related to the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, included, but not limited to, the government's contingency plan for that event and the subsequent efforts to evacuate, or otherwise authorize entry to Canada of Canadian citizens and interpreters, contractors, and other Afghan who had assisted the Canadian Armed Forces and all other Canadian organizations, and that the special committee conduct its work with the primary objective of assessing the humanitarian assistance to be put in place by Canada to assist the Afghan people. The special committee was instructed to present a final report within 6 months of its creation on December 8, 2021. To accomplish this task, the special committee has received testimony and briefs from a range of individuals and organizations, including those that are trying to meet humanitarian needs in Afghanistan. It had heard moving stories and appeals from people with families and colleagues who have been unable to leave Afghanistan or are in precarious situation in neighboring countries. And those who are trying to help them. The special committee was also briefed on government's response by Global Affairs Canada, Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, and the Department of National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces. The report that follows is structured in two parts. The first is respective, examining the August 21 evacuation from Kabul and the events that led up to it, including the assessment and decision that were made. The second part is forward-looking. It details the humanitarian situation inside Afghanistan and the efforts to bring Afghan nationals who are at risk to safety, as well as the impediments that are being encountered. The dedicated focus on this one country at a time of great instability in the world reflects the obligation that stems from Canada's years of military development and diplomatic involvement in Afghanistan, and the enormity of needs and vulnerabilities that exist. So looking back at the fall of the Afghans, of Afghanistan to the Taliban, on April 14, 2021, President Joe Biden announced that the United States would begin the final withdrawal of its forces from Afghanistan on May 1st, 2021. In keeping with the February 29th, 2020 agreement, his country, under the administration of President Donald Trump, had reached with the Taliban in Doha, Qatar. The rationale for intervening in Afghanistan in October 2001 had been to ensure Afghanistan would not be used as a base from which to attack the U.S. homeland again. an objective that President Biden said had been accomplished, the United States could not, he remarked, continue the cycle of extending or expanding our military presence in Afghanistan. Hoping to create ideal conditions for the withdrawal and expecting a different result. Following consultations within his administration and with allies and partners, President Biden concluded that it was time to end America's longest war. After declaring that there is no military solution to the challenges Afghanistan faces, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies announced on the same day that they too would begin the withdrawal of Resolute Support
Mr.
Mission
Chang,
Forces.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Madam Kaibaga, you have your hand up. It's not a point of order, right? No.
No, Mr. Chair, if it was a point of order, I would call one with Mike. I just want to get on the speaking list.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chang, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, withdrawal of Resolute Support Mission Forces by May 1st, 2021. The NATO withdrawal was to be completed within a few months. Even though the involvement of foreign troops was coming to an end, the hope was that an intra-Afghan peace process would result in a settlement. The Taliban had committed through the Doha Agreement to start such negotiation, which had been intended to see discussion of a ceasefire as well as a political roadmap for the country. Nevertheless, negotiation between representative of the Afghan Republic and the Taliban, which commenced in September 2020, did not result in meaningful progress. In May of 2021, the Taliban intensified its military offensive against the Afghan government and began to increase the territory under its control. By mid-July 2021, the Taliban reportedly controlled about half the district in Afghanistan. At least 6 international border crossings with their revenue-generating custom posts and long stretches of highway throughout the country. The first provincial capital to fall to the Taliban on August 6, 2021 was Zaranj in Nimroz province on Afghanistan's western border with Iran. The next day, the Taliban captured its first capital in northern Afghanistan, the capital of Zojan province. By 13 August of 2021, the country's second and third largest cities, Kandahar and Herat, fell under the Taliban control, along with Lashkar-Gah in Helmand province. Then with the capture of Mazar-e-Sharif, the Taliban completed the takeover of northern Afghanistan. On August 15th of 2021, Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani fled by helicopter to Uzbekistan before relocating to the United Arab Emirates. Taliban forces entered Kabul, assuming control of government buildings and the presidential palace. In all, therefore, the Taliban captured 33 of 34 provincial capitals within 10 days. President Biden maintained the August 31st, 2021 deadline for ending the U.S. military mission in Afghanistan, which he had announced on July 8th of 2021, saying that he was not prepared to extend a forever exit. The decision to end the military airlift operation by that deadline, the president indicated, reflected a unanimous recommendation of his civilian and military advisors. On August 26, 2021, a member of the Islamic State, Khorasan, a terrorist group that competes with the Taliban for power and influence in Afghanistan, had detonated a suicide vest at one of the entrances to the Hamid Karzai International Airport, killing 13 U.S. troops, and an estimated 150 Afghan civilians. It was understood that the Taliban tacit cooperation with coalition forces around the security perimeter of the airport would end. So on September the 1st, 2021, in all, during the 18-day period of the multinational air bridge in facilitating and defended, the United States flew 387 military sorties and enabled 391 non-U.S. military sorties to evacuate 124,334 people from Afghanistan. So it comes to play Canada's non-combatant evacuation operation. When the need for an evacuation became clear, Canada was in a different position than some of its allies because there had been no Canadian military mission in Afghanistan since 2014. Canada did not, therefore, have military assets on the ground. The CAF was approved to support the evacuation on July 30th, 2021. In essence, this complex mission involved, in the words of General Wayne Eyre, Chief of Defense Staff, projecting combat power from Canada into a contested environment on the other side of the world where we had not had a military presence for 7 years. Canada was able to do so because of its strategic airlift and communication capabilities, as well as its networks of partners and allies and embedded staff around the world. The people the Canadian Armed Forces were tasked with evacuating included Canadians and Canadian entitled persons, as well as interpreters who had worked with the Canadian Armed Forces and Afghans who had worked for the Canadian embassy over the years. Military and civilian chartered flights began on August the 4th, 2021, but were subsequently disrupted when Kabul fell to the Taliban. So on August 15, 2021, the Government of Canada announced the decision to temporarily suspend Canada's diplomatic operations in Kabul. The rapidly evolving situation was posing a serious challenge to Canada's ability to ensure the safety and security of its diplomatic missions. Canadians still in Afghanistan were instructed to leave immediately while commercial flights were available. Canadian Armed Forces flight resumed from the Kabul airport on August 19, 2021 as part of the U.S.-led air bridge, with the last flight departing on August 26, 2021. Canada and other allies needed to repatriate their personnel and aircraft first so that the United States could complete its own withdrawal and finally cease defending the airport. The Honorable Anita Anand, Minister of National Defense, told the special committee that Canadian personnel stayed as long as possible at great personal risk. The conditions in Kabul were described by the Canadian Armed Forces as having been tenuous, chaotic, and desperate. In all, Canada transported and facilitated the transportation of approximately 3,700 evacuees. Those evacuees included Canadian citizens and permanent residents, their family members, citizens of allied countries, persons with a lasting connection to Canada, and Afghan national at risk accepted for resettlement in Canada and by Canadian allies. The Government of Canada's travel advisory for Afghanistan now indicates that traveling throughout Afghanistan is extremely dangerous, including in Kabul. There are, according to the advisory, checkpoints on all roads and throughout the city. What is more, some borders are closed or may close without notice. So border crossing is very, very risky. So there is a contingency planning and signs of collapse The special committee received conflicting information regarding whether the fall of Kabul and thus Afghanistan to the Taliban was culmination of a political and security situation that was clearly unraveling or a surprise. Reid Sears, former ambassador of Canada to Afghanistan, told the special committee that the complete collapse of the Afghan forces and the Taliban's rapid takeover of Afghanistan came as a surprise to everyone. Jennifer Lawton, Director General of the International Crime and Terrorism at Global Affairs Canada, similarly conveyed that the speed at which the U.S. departure from Afghanistan converted into the Taliban's control of the country surprised the world. She said, and I quote, "I don't think anyone of us would have predicted on August 2021 the fall of Kabul." Owing to Canada's limited presence on the ground in Afghanistan, Canada relied on allies for a lot of its intelligence. According to the Chief of Defense Staff, General Ayer, there was a deterioration in the country, he said, from the announcement of the U.S. withdrawal. In the words of General Ayer, as of April 1st, 2021, our intelligence assessed that the Afghan government was facing a likely defeat, and as time progressed, the timeline for that defeat reduced as well. In subsequent remark, General Ayer expanded on the nature of the expected defeat, namely that should Western forces withdraw, the Taliban would likely decisively defeat the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, capture most major urban areas, and re-establish Taliban control over most of Afghanistan. So by July the 8th, 2021, the Canadian Armed Forces assessed that a maximum of 6 months remained before that eventuality. At the same time, General Ayer stressed that intelligence assessments reflects probability and not absolute certainties. The special committee was given a general sense of how the government's contingency plan evolved. The Honorable Harji Sajjan, speaking about his former role as a Minister of National Defense, indicated that Global Affairs Canada had submitted a request for assistance from the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure that the security of the embassy personnel in Afghanistan. That request was necessary for any troops to be deployed, was authorized in early April of 2021. The Canadian Armed Forces Strategic Advisory Team was in place as of April 24th of 2021, with instructions to provide warning and advice.
Mr. Chang, sorry, I have to interrupt. I think there are bells ringing. If there is no unanimous consent to adjourn, then I have to suspend the meeting. Is there a consent to continue through the bells?
Mr. Chair, no on our side, and we're happy to come back after. I think we have resources, so that we'd like to continue this, because obviously the Liberals are filibustering this, and we'd like to give them the opportunity to keep talking about this motion they don't like.
Thank you. Let me check with the clerk until when the resources are available till. Test the resources we have till 1:30. So basically, once the vote is called, or not the call, but once the vote is announced, then I have to give 10 minutes for members to come back, and then I can do that. It will be only probably few minutes. With that. First is there might be a unanimous consent to continue. No unanimous consent to continue. Okay, there's no unanimous right now, unanimity in continuing this meeting. So I'm going to suspend the meeting, and we have resources till 1:30. Back to order. The food is arrived. So before we break for lunch, I would give the floor, because the floor was with Mr. Chang. I will go to dear Mr. Chang. Carry on, please, till 1:30.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to colleagues here to understand where I'm coming from. In regards, it's important for us to understand when we talk about Banana Republic, and I wanted them to understand, like I had said earlier, not sure what background they have in prior life before becoming a member here. You know, the police services are independent. So I just want to re-emphasize that part, and they are not behold to the government or listen to what the government has to say. Carrying on, in replying to another question about timing, Minister Sargent remarked that Canada's evacuation started as soon as we felt the situation was deteriorating. Ambassador Sears provided further details about the government's contingency planning and the core assessment that were informing decision-making at the time. He said, up until a few days before the decision to temporarily suspend embassy operations, Canada and the international community were expecting difficult times in August and September, but not a complete takeover of the capital. In fact, we expected the Afghan military to defend the city until the onset of winter, allowing time for negotiation to continue. With this in mind, we were considering options to maintain a skeletal.
Chang, I have to, sorry to interrupt you. The resources were available till 1:30. It is 1:30. I call the meeting suspended. Thank you. Let's grab the lunch. So.